Jane Remover is making some of the most unique, colorful, and just overall incredible pieces of art in the underground music space. And the main reason behind her music sounding the way it does is her incredible production. So today I'm sparing no details, doing zero gatekeeping, and teaching you guys everything you need to know about the genius of Jane Remover's production. And this video is going to be split into 4 main sections of our beat to demonstrate each aspect of her music. And this includes her calm yet experimental intros, her massive wall of noise type of drops, her acoustic switch-ups, and her huge experimental EDM-inspired outros. So with that being said, the first thing that we're gonna get into is the intro. And what you'll notice in like 80% of Jane's songs is that they'll start with some kind of acoustic guitar. And something I recommend is recording your own guitar melodies if you are capable. This is not only gonna make your beats much more unique, but it's also gonna lend itself to more creative arrangement methods because you can add on to your guitar that you already have rather than it just being a stagnant 8-bar loop. So with that being said, for the intro, I'm just playing this super simple strummed guitar pattern. And the only effects that I have on that guitar are going to be an EQ. Wow, that is not an EQ. And the only effects that I have on that guitar are going to be a compressor, OTT, which is yet another compressor, an EQ taking out those low ends, and Soothe 2 to take out any harsh resonant frequencies. Now, something that's very prevalent on pretty much all of her album, Frailty, is the mix of acoustic and synthetic components. So with that being said, you're not only gonna want your acoustic guitar, but you're also going to want to introduce synths. And something I noticed by watching Jane Remover's Frailty project breakdown is she likes to use very simple synths, but add a ton of effects onto them to make them unique. So to demonstrate that, we literally just have this sine wave, and the only thing that's unique about it is that the unison is set to 5. But for its effects, we have down a FL Studio plugin called Destructor, which yet again, through watching the Frailty project breakdown, which I heavily recommend watching if you really want to study her production, this is a plugin that she uses quite a bit in her production. And this takes our very simple melody from sounding like this to sounding like this. And this is something that you can duplicate throughout the rest of your melody, just taking super simple wave shapes and adding creative effects on them. And one effect that yet again I've noticed that Jane uses a ton in her production is going to be Good Hertz or GHS Lossy. And with this, you could literally just scroll through the presets and hear what was used in Frailty. It's super cool to hear.
This is without the lossy. So there's that, right?
So with that being said, I just have that along with a convolver reverb, destructor, and an EQ taking out the high ends on this super simple saw wave, taking it from sounding like this to sounding like this. Now, the next thing you're gonna want for your intro are some kind of tame drums with a snare that isn't a snare. And what I mean by that is you're gonna wanna replace your snare with some kind of percussion sound or even a sine wave. Now, this is something that she makes use of a lot through Frailty, but is especially prevalent on Eyes Off the Wheel, I'm a Star. So with that being said, I'm just playing this super unique high-pitched perk. So this is what our drums sound like in this section. Now, the last thing that you're going to want to make use of for your intros is the use of creative effects and sound effects to build a sense of theme for the rest of your beat. And you could do this in 2 main ways. The first of which is having some kind of creative effect like GHS Lossy on your master and automating it so that it only takes up a portion of your intro. And then the second way you could do this is with actual sound effects. And some things I recommend making use of are going to be risers and impacts and down sweeps and stuff of that nature. As well as that, you can make use of tonal effects to make your beat sound much more noisy and cluttered. So for instance, I just have this atmospheric texture tuned to the key of our beat. And the last thing I recommend making use of as far as effects go are going to be life ambience. So just like city ambience or school ambience or nature ambience, just something to give your beat a sense of theme, and also just something to have as an underlying textural component. So with that being said, this is what the entire intro portion sounds like. Sorry to leave you with a little bit of blue balls on that one, but it's going to lead perfectly into what we're covering next of Jane Remover's production. And that's going to be her wall of noise drops. And for these massive drops, you're really only going to want to focus on three main things. The first of which is some kind of distorted electric guitar. And for this, I just recorded my own guitar patterns and double tracked them so that one of them is panned all the way to the left and one of them is panned all the way to the right. And that's just making our guitar sound much more big and wide. And for the effects on that, all that I have down is just a standard amp sim with Fruity Destructor yet again, Fruity Convolver for reverb, and an EQ taking out those low ends. The second thing you're going to want to implement is some kind of noisy, distorted soundscape. And pretty much any of the effects that you hear in this beat are going to be from the Glitch with Friends sound kit. It's a completely free sound kit. I'll link it down below if you guys want to download it, but it's insanely useful for more experimental type of production. So yeah, this is the soundscape that I have down, which is pulled from that kit. And the third and final thing that you're going to want to focus on are moments of silence or pauses within your drop. And aside from that, you're just going to want to make sure your drops are extremely layered. And then final thing that I want to mention for the drop, which ties into the intro portion of our beat, is the use of a sine wave as our snare for the drop. So with that being said, this is what the entire drop together sounds like. And then I forgot to mention, but I also threw down Decapitator on the master for that section just to add some additional distortion. And you're also going to want to make use of super distorted 808s. So with that being said, that's going to completely cover her massive drops. And the next thing that I want to get into is her acoustic style switch ups. And this section of the beat is more so reflective of her project Census Designated, which focuses more on the acoustic aspects of her production rather than those crazy like Daria Core-esque drops. So with that being said, you're really only going to want to focus on four main things. The first of which is a new guitar pattern. And for this, I wanted to go with a more fingerstyle guitar rather than a strummed guitar, kind of to change the vibe of the beat a little bit. And yet again, I've double tracked it so that one of them is panned all the way to the left and one of them is panned all the way to the right. As far as effects on that guitar go, the only thing that I have down is GHS Lossy. As well as that, you're going to want to throw down some kind of acoustic style drums with some very heavy swing to them. And I know I said that this portion of the beat is reflective of Census Designated, but these swing style guitars are especially prevalent in songs like Kodak Moment. How does it feel to be the front of the line? So with that being said, I'm just using Addictive Drums with the repetition preset, but you could really just use any kind of like acoustic drum kit. It doesn't matter what it is, to be honest. And since the swing feature within FL Studio is just like buns, I did the swing myself manually by having every other hi-hat hit right before that end of the triplet marker. So you'll just go to your magnet up here, hit 1/3 beat, and then count your markers 1, 2, 3, and have your hi-hat hit right just before that one. And yet again, you're gonna wanna combine synthetic and acoustic elements. So for that aspect, I just have this same sine wave that we used in the intro, the one with Destructor on it, and I have it playing a super simple top line pattern. And the final thing you're going to want to implement for these kind of sections is, yet again, ambience. The main thing you want to focus on for these kind of beats is just playing around with a ton of effects and ambience to create a sense of theme. As well as that, I just have down 2 separate bassline patterns, but it's not necessarily essential, so I'm not really going to go over it. So with that being said, this is what the entire acoustic section of the beat sounds like. Yet again, a little bit of blue balls with that ending, but it's going to lead perfectly into our next section, which is her experimental EDM-inspired outros. And before I get too deep into that, I want to mention that you can get both the FLP for this beat and the full unedited video of me making this beat on my Patreon down in the description. That way, if you wanted to study the mixing, the mastering, the arrangement, the process it takes to make these kind of beats, the melody, the drums, all that kind of stuff, it's right at your fingertips. So if you're interested in that, go ahead and check it out in the description down below. But let's put that aside and go over her experimental EDM outros. And something I wanted to make use of were super heavy synths with this super unique rate LFO effect. And what I mean by that is I have one LFO affecting the cutoff of our filter and another LFO linked to the rate of the first LFO. So this is the effect that it creates. And synths like this are especially prevalent in her song Champ. So with that being said, I just have that synth playing this chord progression. As well as that, I have this super distorted square wave bass doing pretty much the opposite of that first synth. The first synth starts at a high rate and goes to a lower rate, so it goes, but the bass starts at a low rate and goes to a high rate, so it's gonna go dun 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 dun, and it's just playing the root notes of our chord progression. As well as that, I'm making use of another synth playing this kind of like up and down sort of pattern following our chord progression. And this up and down pattern is something that's prevalent in your clothes. And all it's doing is playing the root and the third of each of our chords in the chord progression. Super simple stuff. As well as that, for these kind of drops, yet again, you're gonna wanna focus on those super distorted, heavy, noisy soundscapes. I'm telling you, stuff like this makes such a huge difference. Just having those extra layers makes these kind of drops feel so much more big and grand. And finally, the last thing that you're gonna wanna focus on for these kind of experimental outros is just absolutely spamming effects. And like I said before, pretty much every single one of these effects are from the glitch Glitch with Friends kit. And I have them playing in between those moments of silence with the chords. So I just have various glitch loops, as well as impacts, and some screams with bit crush automation. And that's yet another effect that you're gonna wanna make use of a lot for these kind of beats, bit crushing. And for the outro of the outro, I just have one of our synths ring out for like 8 bars, introduce some more ambience, and have GHS lossy automating so that it gradually increases, and the volume of that preset automating so it gradually decreases. So with that being said, I'm gonna play this beat in its entirety. And I want you to focus on the importance of everything you've learned today and how it intertwines to create these magnificent grand beats. And this includes the mixing of acoustic and synthetic components, the use of various creative effects and sound effects, the importance of layering, and how important it is to have creative arrangement in order to maintain energy throughout your beats. So with that being said, this is what the beat sounds like in its entirety. So with that being said, that is going to completely cover the genius of Jane Remover's production. I really hope you enjoyed this video and learned something new. If you have any questions, please throw them in the comments down below and I will do my best to answer them. As well as that, yet again, consider checking out my Patreon where you get the FLPs for all of my beats in all of my videos and the entire unedited recordings of my process making the video. That way, if you wanted to study the mixing, mastering, arrangement, melody, drums, all that kind of stuff, it's right at your fingertips. And finally, consider subscribing as I post one tutorial a week and one sound kit a month. Other than that, it's gonna be it. Peace!